what I've been doing for a few years right now, it's working with small and large websites on the idea, but not telling them not to use JavaScript or not telling them not to use the best web technologies and user experience that you can create for your user, but how to make sure that those websites and this great user experience that you can create is understood by search engine and platforms, social medias that need to access your website and information that is on it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I lead the technical SEO team at Merkle. I thought that was really cool to have like JSON LD like for information, unless you speak after Paul Shapiro and it looks like you just copy and paste it from him. So, but we never like talk about that. It happens to both of us doing that. So anyway, next time I will speak before him and it will be original. So, so let's. Hello. Yeah. So hopefully we have like a mix of like marketers here and developers. And the thing that like we always look into first is really the crawl aspect of things. It's great, and like content marketing and all of that like plays into obviously that, but like it's this simple like the idea that like your great user experience or the awesome content that your teams will put together, if search engine cannot access that, if they cannot like crawl that, they'll have no way to index it, and then it cannot be ranked. So that's the place where we start, is like looking at like crawling. And since for a few years right now, like Google has been like rendering web pages. So instead of looking at the source code, they look at the rendered page and what's really on it, what users can actually see. So right now it's a lot about that. It's how the page is rendered and how to make sure that users can get that, but like certain. So, that. Sorry. So it's yet to be tested. Like we are actually working with authors. You've probably heard of him lately. He's published like a lot of tests. He's published like a lot of tests around like our search engine like render web pages, and so we are working with them like on Baidu, because since Baidu announced publicly and claimed that they render web pages, well, we're not going to take their word for it. We're going to test that and see really how that works for them and find out how they do that. So on the Google side, we got more information. They decided to be more transparent about it and like tell us exactly what they are doing. So they are using Chrome 41 for now. So it's a pretty old version of Chrome, but still, that's a good information for testing, automation. Paul talked about that. We know that a lot of tools, and I'm going to mention that later, but like a lot of tools right now, they're all rendering like JavaScript as well. So when you crawl your website, you can have a better understanding. Using Chrome is definitely the way to go here to get closer to what Google is getting when they crawl your website. The good news is that Google is working on updating that. They are not going to be using Chrome 41 in the future. They're going to always be, so Googlebot and Caffeine, to be specific, who's rendering your web pages, is going to be using like the latest available Chrome version. So when users get whatever, like Chrome 60 something, Googlebot and Caffeine, they're going to be using that as well. So there is no need for your tools, your automation to specifically use Chrome 41. I think to be future-proof here, like just use the latest version of Chrome, because Googlebot and again Caffeine, to be specific, will get there as well. So the only thing to remember is that some APIs are not being activated or used. For example, like just the payment stuff and like service workers are disabled. They don't need to use that from a crawling and indexing standpoint. So with that said, the idea of that unfortunately we can still read in the industry somewhere on blog post of being careful with web technologies because Google cannot get it, then it's kind of like counterproductive. At the end of the day, when Google and other search engines say, you should create awesome content and focus on the user. And like people are like, yeah, but it doesn't help. But it's kind of what it is. And our job as like technical SEOs or consultant or whatever we do here is not to tell people to be careful with what they are doing. It's to tell them, yes, build like the best user experience that you can, use the latest technology, make like awesome progressive web apps and things that go really fast and that are like interactive and fluid and like looks like native apps or whatever. And our job is to warn them that like make sure that search engine can understand that, and other platform. Not the other way around. We don't build website for search engine. We build website for users, and then we have to make sure that other platforms and search engine can understand that and reward you with ranking for that. So the original problem with like those new web technologies and search engine or platforms like crawlers not getting like the JavaScript things is in the source code you get nothing basically. Like if you look at like a modern website built with a JavaScript library, you get that. So literally on like in a few lines, like 40 lines of code, you get the opening HTML tag and the closing one, and there's nothing. So, okay, sorry. So that's the original problem here. We have no content like for any client to parse and understand, because it's all in the DOM. Everything is there for the user to see, for the user to consume, but like crawlers and platforms that do not render the web page like a browser do, like the user see, they're not gonna get anything out of it. So again, Baidu, Google, like some platform have started to do that for years right now. They're pretty good at it, except that there is like still things to remember, and we're gonna talk about that, to make sure that they can see it. Because it's not about letting like those platforms and search engine like use their new technology and like hope for the best. You still need to make sure that they get there. Because it's, again, not just about Google. Like Bing, unfortunately, we're pretty sure they're working on it. They have to execute like JavaScript and render pages. We've seen examples, like it seems sometimes they follow JavaScript for directs and they render some type of content, but they've not claimed publicly that they are doing that at scale. So we can unfortunately not rely on that for now. And it's not just about search engine. Like think about just optimization for like Twitter cards or open graph tags that you put in the head section of your pages. If it's all like dynamically rendered on JavaScript, then it's not going to work for Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. They're not going to see that. And so you're not going to get your optimized like snippet to share. And we all know that social shares are quite important. So a few things, and we're going to go into details here, but like a few things that do not work directly, or like is the fact that if you cannot crawl the pages because like you don't have like different URLs, you know, I've heard like some people talking about the web without URI or URLs, and they thought like, okay, how can that work? Like something as an address, you know, it needs to be somewhere to be found. It's like you cannot just tell Amazon to ship you something, and like if you don't give your address, it's the same idea. Things need to exist somewhere to be found. So when you have a single page application, that's great. It should not be a single URL application because content needs to be somewhere. So unfortunately with JavaScript framework sometimes, and it's getting better like by default, but you can get just everything on the same page and like nothing you click and the user has a great experience. They go from one page to another, but search engine cannot do that. So that's something that definitely needs to be fixed. Other thing is sometimes that, yes, the content will change, like the main content on the page, but the title will stay the same, and everything in the head section of the page will stay the same. So that creates like issues as well. Link structure, again, we're going to go into detail here about like few things that need to be remembered and taken care of. So let's start with the crawling things. Again, we're going to think about crawling, indexing, and rendering right in the middle. So the URL structure, as I just mentioned. So originally, like frameworks like AngularJS, by default, you get this type of URL. And it doesn't work. Why? Because everything after the fragment identifier or the hash character is not sent to the server. The request is not made. Like the URL like that actually is just example.com. It's not example.com/hash URL. And so originally, like engines like that are not acting like a browser, they will not request that. They will just request example.com, which is still what Bing is doing. It's a bit better for Google right now, but still, it's something, the content being loaded after the hash, because of that URL, will just happen on the browser and not for crawlers. So the fix was the hash bang. So there was a scheme introduced by Google years ago saying, okay, if you have this type of URLs, like just add like an exclamation point after your hash. We'll understand that we need to request a different URL for that particular URL. We're going to request the escape fragment URL, and there you have to set up your server to give us a HTML snapshot, which is a pre-rendered version of the page, and then we're going to index that content that we find there, but we'll still show the... Anyway, you see my point. It's really complicated. They got rid of it. So why I struck out Google, because it's coming, it was supposed to come this week as an official like Google post announcement. They deprecated the recommendation of that scheme about 2 years ago. But they're going to announce that they're actually like deprecating the scheme itself. So it's going to roll out like through Q1 of 2018. They're going to stop requesting the escape fragment. So if you have that in place, if you have this setup in place where you serve snapshots on the escape fragment URL, then Google is going to stop doing that. So you should probably keep that in place for Bing. Bing is still supporting the scheme here, but Google is going to stop and just render your page with the hash bang URL in a browser type of setting and index that. So it's kind of important to know, because if you have some type of rendering, not issues, but like things on your side that like are rendered like in a different way that might not be in the rendered version, but in the escape fragment snapshot that you serve to Google, then you might run into issues when they stop requesting the escape fragment and only render your page. So that's where we're going here, and think about all those things. So I should have like switched to that slide. So anyway, exactly what I was saying, Google deprecated the recommendation, but also the scheme rolling out like until actually Q2. So anyway, so the recommendation is to use clean URLs that any bot, any crawler can access, any user can share, and you can do that usually using the push state function of the history API that came with HTML5, so it's not like something new, and that's the recommendation to create like just URLs that look completely clean. Internal linking. This is a really, really important thing. On-click events, JavaScript events with like window locations do not really like represent like classic Ahref links. So using this type of implementation, it's seamless for the user. They get exactly the same thing. They go from one page to another. But search engine, they do not like, they might see the URL because it's like clearly stated in the window location statement. You might just have like the URL string here, and we know that Google crawls everything that they can, sometimes too much, and they find like that's why you get spike in like 404s, because they are finding strings that look somehow like a URL, and they're gonna try to crawl that, and you get like 404s because they don't really exist. So anyway, they might find those URLs, but they are not considering them as classic links. And so that's really, really important to, regardless the framework, the JavaScript implementation that you have, that you make sure that your internal links are Ahref, classic ones. Because the power of internal linking is just, I mean, huge. Internal link can override canonical tags. They are more crawled than like URL that you will put in a sitemap. So anything that like is linked internally is it's a really strong signal to search engine, and you don't want to miss that by just having on-click events instead of Ahref. So crawlability of the website is the starting point, and Ahref tags is the base. The rendering piece, blocked resources. So Paul talked about automation, and we actually, I built like a automated script that crawls our client's robots.txt every single day just to track like changes in the robots.txt and change in the content or in the status code. And it runs every day at 6 a.m., 9 a.m. Eastern time. I was surprised when I learned that thing. I was surprised how many notifications I would get. I would think that like our clients would not change the robots.txt that often. Every single day I receive like between 1 and 5 like notification, like just the status code has changed. They added like a new disallowed statement. They are removing stuff. It's kind of crazy. You would think that like this file doesn't change that often, but like every single day, one of our clients or more are changing things. And we are not always like warned about it, and like it happens that sometimes they would block like rendering of the site because JavaScript assets are blocked or like CSS or anything. And so when Google cannot, search engine cannot access those assets, they cannot crawl the website properly. It's not just about the URL itself, it's about rendering the page, and then you get this type of results here. Obviously my personal website is not blocked, that's just an example, but the loading of the content. So again, you can get like pre-render services and like pre-render your pages if you're concerned about like Google rendering your website. What happened though is that if the loading of the content is based on user interaction, then nobody's gonna ever get it except the users. And okay, again, that's great, but like search engine cannot act. Google is a lazy user. They're not gonna scroll down your page, they're not gonna hover on stuff, they're not gonna click on things. So some people have been testing that, and there was like some signs of user interaction mimicking, but again, it's not scaled and it's not, you cannot rely on that. So when we talk about like mega menus, for example, so I've talked to developers that wants to save some time and improve like rendering of the page, like site latency, page speed, by delaying like the rendering of those items and images and links when the user hover on the menu. That's a great idea, except that like those links, they're not gonna be in the DOM when the page loads. So you can take a snapshot, like pre-render the page, Google can access the page, they're gonna render your page, they're not gonna get those links because they're not gonna hover on those menu items. So while it's a good idea to speed up the page rendering, it's not something that should be done because search engine cannot access those links. And again, talking about internal linking and the power of it, that's a big no-no here. We see that also with like tab content. So again, that's great, sounds like a good idea not to load the content on tab 2, 3, 4, 5, because why loading that and like adding that to the loading of the page when the user might not need it right away? But like if Google and search engine cannot access it because it's not loaded on the page because it's on tab 2 and 3, then you're not gonna get any benefits from that content. It's especially important because as of right now, content that is seen, source code, DOM, directly loaded, content that is on tab like 2, 3, accordion and everything, even if Google can get it, it's devalued because the idea is that they don't want to rank a page where the content is not directly visible to the user. They don't want to say, hey, this page has what you're looking for. The user goes on the page and they don't see that content right away because it's hidden in the tab 2. So it's devalued. It's there, you're going to rank for it, it's going to be indexed, but they're not going to really like value that type of content as much as tab 1. Well, that is changing because the mobile-first indexing process that they're working on, that some websites are already in, you have to have this type of implementation for user experience. You need to have accordion, you need to have tabs, because when you design like a website for mobile, you cannot have people like scroll down like forever. So you need to use this type of like design things, and Google knows that, they understand that, and they're not gonna devalue the content anymore when it's hidden for user experience purposes. So that's especially important, like to make sure that they can actually get that content, because it's gonna be as important as the one on tab 1 or expanded accordion. The last thing is the load more. It's pretty classic. Again, if when you click on like show me more or load more and it doesn't change the URL, then like high chances that like your pre-render page, like your snapshot or Google is not gonna see that unless it's already loaded directly in the DOM when the page first load and not when the user click on that. So those things are extremely important to remember. Still on the content loading piece, the 5-second rule, what I call the 5-second rule. It appears that Google is taking a snapshot of the page after 5 seconds. So if for some reason you are delaying like the rendering or the loading of some content past 5 seconds for whatever reason, high chances that Google is not seeing it. That could be a tip to avoid like any penalty for pop-ups, for example. Google doesn't like pop-ups that are blocking like the content of the page. And so maybe if you delay your content like past 5 seconds, they might not see it. That's what tells me that they might change that and adjust this rendering rule or whatever to detecting the function. So they might like look at your JavaScript code, say, hey, it looks like you have a delayed function, like and show a pop-up after 10 seconds, and we're gonna just wait until 10 seconds and render your page and see your pop-up. So it's interesting to know, but I would not rely on that to just to do black hat stuff. So the best practice though, when it comes to HTML snapshot, obviously, like Bing and Facebook, other like platform need to have like the rendered content because they do not execute JavaScript. Something that came up like pretty recently and like that is built in like a lot of frameworks right now is like the idea of isomorphic JavaScript and or hybrid rendering, where the user get like this awesome Ajax experience where everything happens on the client side. You go to one page to another and it's really fast. Ajax is going on, but when the page first loads, each URL is loaded independently like crawlers do, then everything is in the source code. Everything is there, or at least in the DOM, and so so search engine can get that for each single URL that they crawl. So that's kind of the best practice here is to use those frameworks that have isomorphic or hybrid rendering technologies. There is a lot of documentation around that, especially on the Google side, about PWAs and how to use hybrid rendering for that. So the indexing part, really quick on this, is again the idea that even if you have like pre-render services or do snapshots, you might get like your content to change here in the ng view for Angular, for example, here. But we see a lot of websites that like do not take care of the head section. And you might get like exactly the same information as a title, the meta description, your hreflang tags, like any important tag, rel pref next, all those like really important canonical tag, all those important like SEO signals, that might not change because everything is about the content in the body section and not the head section. So again, something to remember because it could impact indexing. If you have like the same information there, canonical tag can screw everything up, and even just like duplicate page titles. It sounds really simple and like really old school like SEO, but it still matters. And having duplicate page title over the entire website can be like an issue. Okay, what about the tools? So the Search Console, like fetch and render, obviously a great resource, but not perfect. The good news, though, is that they're going to release either a new tool or an updated version of that will show like the DOM snapshot. So you will get the rendered code into that tool from whatever Chrome version they are using. So we'll get more information from Google directly. So, but still, like as it is, a great resource. So I built one on technicalseo.com that you can find a fetch and render. That has already like the DOM snapshot, the rendered code. The only thing about that, and I need to spend time on it to update it, it's using like Phantom.js and not Chrome as the rendering engine, and so has some limitation. Kind of works in like 95% of the time, but for example, if you're using new frameworks like Polymer and Web Components, it's not rendering like everything. So might be an issue here, but I will update that. And SEO crawlers, again, a lot of them, like deep crawl, I think it's coming really, really soon. Really excited about that. But Bodify, Screaming Frog, Sideboard, they're all rendering like pages and executing JavaScript. So definitely a resource. And maybe the best SEO tool ever, Chrome Dev Tools, including Lighthouse, that like Paul mentioned as well, is definitely like something to look out, like JavaScript errors that might just trigger like issues with rendering of the page. So. And yeah, I went a couple minutes over, sorry about that, but thank you.
Jennifer Max.
Wow, quite a number.
You mentioned about duplicating pages and to avoid them. So I work at a large e-commerce. I'm the SEO specialist for them, and one of the biggest problems we have is duplicated titles, and it's because it goes page one, it's the whole pagination thing, where it goes page one, page two, page three, they all have duplicated titles. So is there a tool or something or a way to work around that?
Well, in that particular case, I think it's fine. If we're talking about like a series of pages, I don't know, let's say like women's jeans, for example, and you have like a lot of product that are like split into like, 10 pages, and you don't really need to really update that. It's not really a need to have like women's jeans like page one, women's jeans page two. If you have like proper rel prev next tag in place, then the equity will be like, the sequence will be consolidated into one. And so I think in that particular case, it's less of an issue because the page is about the same thing. It's just listing a different set of product. But it's not like facet navigation. For example, if you have like, I don't know, TVs, for example, and like you click on like a filter for brand, and like you have Samsung, you click on Samsung, then yes, maybe there should be a different URL. There should be like a title tag and like some type of content on the page that talk about like Samsung TVs, for example. So that will make the page more specific and more relevant to queries around Samsung TVs or like TV Wi-Fi enable or whatever. All those filters that you can select that trigger like a different set of products. Maybe the page should be like optimized for that to long tail queries and things like that. But yeah.
Hey, Max. Quick question off of Twitter from James Chapman. He's looking for some clarification. Will Google disregard content loaded after 5 seconds or milliseconds? Slide said one thing, you said another. Okay, so if it's a hard rule, that would be 5 seconds. So that's what we see with like, tested it with indexation. Literally, like the content after 5 seconds was not indexed. As you can see, like in tools that Google provides with screenshot, if we delay its function, like for example, you can just test it yourself and change the color of your text. And if it's after 5 seconds, you might not see it like in those screenshots. But again, Google trying to understand the user experience the best they can. And like penalizing sites that, for example, have like pop-ups, interstitials, and they might just go over like those 5 seconds to really understand like what's going on the website. So,
I'll do one more question. Are you sure? Okay.
So I actually could not hear you really well, but like, so I think I got most of it. So, but like paid links. Yeah, sponsored links. Okay, sponsor link, and like, yeah, I think, and the question is about like having a nofollow tag on that. I think that's still the best practice. I'm not the expert there, but actually, like, feel free to, my colleague Kyla Becker, she works at Merkle with me, and like, she's the link ninja expert here, and like, she will have probably an answer for that. So, thank you.